Okay, so as I said before, we're going to just write the formula in the first cell here, and then we will copy it over to all of the cells later. Now I'm going to just put the first equals. We're going to write a very long if statement, so I will actually expand this formula bar a little bit longer, or yeah, taller, so I can write more and it's visible. So I'm going to first start with if. Our first logic we want to implement is if the date is a valid date. So the date we are referring to is 1st March here, right? So let's look at that. And we're going to lock row 7 because the row 7 is where our dates are. So we don't want that row to keep incrementing. So if this specific date equals nothing, then do NA, comma. So this means what it's going to do is if this date equals nothing, then it'll put NA. Otherwise, what do you want to do? For now, let's just say nothing. I want to just display nothing. Okay. I'm going to close this and I'm going to press enter. And in this case, it says nothing. And let me just apply the formula to all the cells right now so that it becomes easy for us as we go forward. Okay, now control enter, which will apply the formula. Now the formulas have been applied to all the cells. Let's just color it in a slightly different color so that we know where these formulas are going to be applied. Okay, now we've applied the formula. Okay, there's no NA. That's because in March, there's no NA invalid date. So let's choose February. Now see what happens. So all of the invalid dates are now shown as NA. That's pretty nice. So now this formula is working. It is showing the invalid dates. Whenever the invalid date happens, it'll show NA. This is good. Now I'm going to start expanding the formula. The way to expand the formula is this last part where we said don't display anything. I'm just gonna keep putting that at the end. And if the date is invalid, then NA. The second part, what we want to do is if the employee name that we are interested in equals nothing, then also display NA. So here we want to lock the column B, not the row, because column is always going to be, the employee name is always going to be in column B. And then so as the formula gets copied, we still want it to refer to column B. So I'm going to lock the column B equals nothing, then NA, comma. If not, we want it to display nothing. Okay. Now, since we have created a new if statement with an open parenthesis, we will have to close it. So I add another parenthesis at the end. Excel will indicate, so when I go over here, you can see that it's indicating that it is this close parenthesis is related to this open parenthesis. Since this is the first one, I know that I've covered all the parentheses. So when we edit these formulas, we also always have to make sure that the opened parentheses are always closed in the correct place. If you don't have the matching close parenthesis, Excel will give you an error. In this case, I don't expect it to give an error. So let's put enter first, and then I'm going to select all the cells. A quick tip here to select all the cells. So you do Shift, Control, press both at the same time, press the right arrow, which will select all the way up to here, and then don't remove the Shift or Control. Keep pressing it and press the down arrow. It will select all these cells as well. So now I'm going to just edit, press Control, Enter. This applies the same formula to now all these cells. So this is great. Now we are able to clearly say all these records, we don't have any employees. These cells, we don't have any valid dates. So now, so far, the formulas are working fine. Now let's go and expand the formula to the next section, which is if the employee has not started yet, it should be considered as a not employed section. So we're going to press Alt, Enter to open a new line, not open, but actually create a new line. I like this approach because it's easier to read, but once you become very familiar with writing Excel formulas, the long ones, then you may not need it, but this helps a little bit in keeping it easier to follow. Now, in this case, we want to go and find the employee start date. So I'm going to use the index function, which we already learned. Index, go to the employee table, t underscore emp, open the brackets this way, the square brackets, and then this will show all the different columns in that table. And we're going to select the start date, press tab to open it up. One of the problems with the tab is it removed the other parts we had. So I'm going to press Control Z because I still want to keep this section. And so let me do start date, close the square brackets, and then go to this employee start date column and find me the start date for the employee that I'm interested in. We already learned how to find a specific row from a table. So that would be row of, let's say in this case, C8 minus row of, we're going to lock C7. So this means when I keep going down, it'll still refer to the 7th row, which is the header row. And we can close this thing. This is going to be giving us the start date for the employee. Now, if this date is greater than our reference date here is C7, so let's do C7, then tell me that the employee is not employed, right? And then put a comma again. And since we opened a new if, we may have to close, and that's it. That's it. So I'm going to copy the formula to all the cells here again. And now here we see that NE is being applied to these cells. I'm going to just make the font size a little bit smaller for these cells so they're not overpowering our visual. Okay, so you can see that these are NE, that means not employed. This employee 2 was not employed here. So let's go and test it out. Employee 2 was actually starting on 12th June. So we saw that employee 2 was not employed and employee 4 was also not employed. So when we changed it to June, now you see that employee 4 is already employed. So there's no NE. Employee 2 until June 11th shows up as not employed. And after that, he or she is employed. So correctly, our formula is capturing the logic here. So then the next part is we want to also make sure that the end date, if the employee is finished the employment, then we should also show NE. So in order to do this, we're going to write a very similar one, but it is going to be a little bit more complicated because the end date is not always a required field. The end date, somebody could have a no end date because they're still employed. So in order to do that, we will actually have to check for two conditions. So the first one is index t underscore emp end date, comma, we already know how to get the row number, so we're going to just write the same formula again, row C lock 7. So this should be less than our date, so that's pretty straightforward. So that means the end date has already passed, right? And then we also have to put in a similar part here to check for if it is even present. The end date should not be blank. So we can even copy the formula. So I'm going to copy this section and I can paste it here and then say this end date should also be greater than 0. So the reason why we have to do this is because Excel, when it has a blank in the end date column, when we pull it through a formula, it'll consider that as 0. So we want to make sure that it's greater than 0, which means it is a valid end date. The employee has ended its employment. So what we have done here is we are checking for this greater than 0, and you see that I have put an AND function. So AND function works in such a way that it checks for this condition that should be true, which means the end date should be in the past. And it also wants to make sure that the end date should be greater than 0. Two conditions here, and both should be valid for this to return true. So if it is true, comma, we want it to say NE, not employed, right? So that's what we want it to say, and put another comma. And since we have opened a new if, we need to close with another one. And so this is what our formula will do now. select everything, press Control Enter, and you see that this employee 1 is not employed from June 11th. So let's go and see if the employee 1 end date is 10th June. So the employee is employed through 10th of June. After that, that employee will be considered as not employed. So our formula logic is working correctly so far. Now, the next part is we need to check if the date is a holiday. So to check if the date is a holiday, we'll do the same Alt Enter to go to the next line. We'll open a if function and say, how do we know if it's something is a holiday? We're going to do match this date C7. Go and see if it is in the list of holidays, L underscore this, exact match. So if this date is present there, then it will return a number. So if that number is greater than 0, that means it's a holiday. If not, don't display anything, and so we'll close the parenthesis. So there is one issue with this, which we will see shortly with this formula now. I've applied it to everything, and now you see a bunch of NAs. So the match function will return a number if it finds a match. If it is a holiday, it'll give a number. But if it's not a holiday, it'll actually not return, it'll return an invalid or a NA error. So we want to wrap this with an if error function and say if it's, so the if error is going to do is if error will apply to the match function and say if the match results in a valid match, which means a number, then use that number. Otherwise, call it 0. So that's what we're going to do with the if error function. The if error function will convert an error into a 0. And is 0 greater than 0? No. So it won't be a holiday. So this is how we're going to overcome this thing. We'll do an if error. So I'm going to press enter now, and then I will select all the cells, press Control Enter to apply. And now you see that it's not an error. Now let's see if any of the holidays are correctly represented. We have holiday on January 1st and May 1st. So we can, for example, choose May. You'll see that HOL is appearing. So once again, the formula will be applied in the order here. So if the employee is not employed, it's going to say any not holiday, even though it's a company holiday, but that employee wasn't even employed. So it'll show any even though it's a holiday date, because any is done above holiday in the order or the sequence of the formula. It actually will go through this order. Whichever one first matches, it'll populate that value. It won't even go to the next line to check. Okay, so now we have come through all the way to holiday, and now we have two more places to go. One is the weekend. So I'm going to do Alt Enter, and then we'll open a new if function. And in this case, we're going to check for the, we'll do an index function here. Index, go to the L underscore weekends, which is where we stored the weekend choices, and then look for whether this specific day is a weekend or not. So in this case, I'm going to do weekday function of our date, which is C7. So in C7, and usually I always choose the Sunday through Saturday. Sunday is number 1, Saturday is number 7 option, because that's kind of the default option. So you don't even have to mention it. We can just close it. So the weekday will result in a number. So 1 means Sunday. So in this case, it's a Tuesday, right? So let's do F9, it'll give 3. So Sunday is 1, Monday is 2, Tuesday is 3. This order is important because if you remember, we chose to enter Sunday, Monday, Tuesday in the setting sheet, the order. So the same order will have to be matched here. That's why I choose the weekday default option. And then if the index is going to be true, if this results in a true, that means it's a weekend. So I'm going to populate it with weekend. Otherwise, we don't display anything. And now since we opened a new if function, we'll close it, press enter, select everything, Control Enter. Now we see that weekends are populated. Saturday, Sundays are weekends, Saturday, Sundays are weekends. So if you change the weekend here to be a Wednesday, for example, now all the Wednesdays will also show up as weekends. So this is how you want to test when you're building something like this, to test the different possibilities and make sure that your formula is still capturing those scenarios. Okay, now we've completed the weekend, and now the last important and critical part here is the type of vacation. So Alt Enter to open a new line, and this is going to be a slightly different part of the formula here. So what we're going to do is use a new function called SumProduct, and the SumProduct is going to, as the name indicates, it's going to multiply and then add up the results. So we'll see that in action now. So the first thing we want to do is find out if this only this employee's vacation information. So we want to limit our selection to only this. So go to the vacation table, and then there is employee name column. Let's type that in, employee name, comma. So go and then this employee name should equal this employee that we are interested in, which is column B, cell 8. So whenever this is true, say 1 or 0, right? That's what we want to do. But Excel by default will give you a true or false. And so we're going to convert the true or false into ones and zeros by putting this minus sign at the beginning. So this will actually convert. So let's test it out. So let's F9. And so what it's going to do is to go to the vacation type, vacation data table, where we have 3 rows. It's actually saying that the first row is related to this employee in the vacation table. So I'll do Control Z to undo. So this is how the SumProduct function is going to work, where it goes and assigns a 1 or a 0 whenever there is an employee name match. And then we want to know is the date should be matching, right? So we will do again the start date in the vacation table. The start date should be less than or equals this C7, which is our date. And so the vacation should have started on or before the date that we are interested in. And again, we did a minus and converted that into ones and zeros. And then similarly, we want to make sure that the vacation end date should be greater than or equals our date. So now we have done that. So now employee name should match, the start date and the end date should be overlapping with the date here. And then the last part here is once there is a match, give me the row number, right? So we go and say, give me the row number for vacation type. Okay, so we did that. So now we know all of this. So when we close this one, the SumProduct is going to give you whenever the employee matched, whenever the start date and the end date overlapped, give me the row number there. So once we get the row number here, we need to subtract the header, because row number function usually gives the row in the sheet, but we want to subtract the header. So the header here is the T_vacation table, and in this case we want to make sure that it's the header. So headers, close. And so now we have found the exact row where we want to pull the vacation type from. So come back to the beginning and then say index T_vacation table and vacation type column, and use all of this as my row number. So once we do this, then close it, and let's see where it closed. So it is actually closing in the SumProduct here. So I should have put another one over here. Okay, so this SumProduct will give the row number of the sheet, and then we subtract the row number of the header in order to give us the exact row inside the table. And then we are interested in the vacation type column, so that's why we do that in the index function. Do all this, and then if there is no vacation, what should you do? then this will not have anything, right? It'll result in an error. So we'll wrap this up with an IFERROR function and then put a comma here and then say if it's an error, then we want to show nothing, which is what this is. And then we may have to close the parenthesis again because we opened a new one. So I'm going to press enter and apply it to all the formulas, all the cells. And now we have this information. So let's see if we want to test this by looking at the vacation data, vacation, Jan, July, and June. So in those months, we have some vacation. So let's just choose one of those. So let's see June. Now here, the employee has taken vacation, and that's why it's showing up as vacation. And we can't see the entire text because we have narrowed the columns, but you can see that this is actually a vacation day. The employee is taking vacation. Employee 3 is taking vacation on Tuesday, Tuesday, June 5th. Employee 3 is taking vacation on 5th June to 12th June. So employee 3, 5th June to 12th June, that's the vacation period. But there are 2 days of weekends in between. So those are shown as weekends. Otherwise, they're shown as vacation. So the formula is working fine. So to show the vacation, and what we can do is the display nothing part, we can make it show work, because we want to show that if none of this is true, then that's a work day. So I'm going to just change the formula to show work, apply it to all the cells. There we have it. So we have now completed this complex nested if formula, which is, again, start with the logic, take one thing at a time, and then write each line and then keep testing it. And then you will be able to, find how the formula works and where there is an issue, if there is one. And then you, whenever you find errors, wherever there is a valid error or error that should be accepted, then put an if error and wrap it around. And then make sure that all the parentheses that you open, you close it in the correct spot. That is critical for the accuracy of the formula. But I know that it doesn't look as pretty right now, but that's what we're going to do in the next step to make this appear very visually appealing. But the formula is the critical part. If the formula is not correct, we are not going to be able to get the accurate dashboard built. But we have done the hard part. Now in the next section, we'll do the more fun part of actually coloring all this in a very visually effective and appealing way.